Just how good is the Mariners rotation? I checked in with Alex Fast at PitcherList.com to get his thoughts. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Thursday, March 9th, 2023. This is Trident for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. The link as well as our social accounts is in the description below. On the show today, Alex Fast of PitcherList.com joins me to talk about the Mariners rotation. We get into Logan Gilbert's new splitter, the differences between Cincinnati Luis Castillo and Seattle Luis Castillo, Robbie Ray's first season with the Mariners, and of course, George Kirby. I think you'll like what Alex has to say about him. Be sure to stick around until the end of the show. I'm giving away 2 main level tickets to one of the Mariners value games in April or May. I'll tell you how you can win those, but let's check in with Alex Fast and talk some Mariners pitching. Joining me now on the Locked On Mariners podcast is the VP of one of my personal favorite baseball resources on the internet. It's called PitcherList.com. Check it out if you haven't. His name is Alex Fast, and he's here to talk about this exciting Mariners pitching staff. Alex, first, thank you for hopping on. I guess we'll start there with a very broad question. Just how do you view Seattle's staff and particularly its rotation relative to the rest of the league right now?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me. If there's one team that I'm excited to come talk about their rotation, it's the Seattle Mariners. I think there's a lot to be excited about, and as an Orioles fan, I empathize with any organization that is really starting to put it together. You know what I mean? Like seeing them in the playoffs last year obviously didn't end the way that people wanted it to, but like, man, what an exciting team and fan base to be a part of right now. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for that. What was the question? It was about the thoughts on the rotation.
All good. Hey, I'm equally as excited to have you on the show as well. So yeah, the question was generally like, how do you view this team, or this pitching staff, and particularly the rotation relative to the rest of the league? Like, where do they rank in the overall hierarchy of Major League Baseball rotations right now?
I think they're, I can't believe I forgot the question. I've never done that. I was just so excited looking at the roster resource page. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it, dude. I think it has honestly the potential to be a top 10 rotation in baseball. I mean, there's so much upside. There's so much upside 1 through 4. I don't want to dig on Marco Gonzalez because he's a very good standby, but I think he's kind of number 5 in that rotation for a reason. There's obviously a lot of great talent in the minors for you guys, with the ability to even have Chris Flexen come in and be a number 5 there. But overall, the 1 through 4, I believe could arguably, like, that's a lot of depth there, right? There's a lot of depth when, like, theoretically your 1 through 4 any of them could ostensibly be an SP1 or have been, aside maybe Logan Gilbert, right? Like, I'm a firm believer in George Kirby, and we'll get to him momentarily. Robbie Ray can be an SP1, right? Don't think he will be, but has that potential upside. Luis Castillo has been and can be a continuous SP1 for that team. So when you're dealing with so many potential guys like that so late into your rotation, that's dangerous, man. That's really good. That's really exciting to watch. So yeah, I think there's a lot of really good depth in that rotation. I'm excited to watch them work.
One of the reasons I wanted to get you on here was, excuse me, I saw you quote tweet that video of Logan Gilbert working on his new splitter. You seem pretty excited about it. So if that pitch proves to be a viable option in Major League games this year, what do you think that does for Gilbert moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, Gilbert's a very exciting pitcher, and I always like to caveat by, like, I made like a little meme this year of Bart Simpson drawing on the chalkboard that said essentially like, I will not fall for new pitch types. Like, I just will not fall for new pitch types, because here's the thing about new pitch types. Spring training is a very exciting time for every single fan base, right? Because hope springs eternal, and we're building off something. And when we see a new pitch that's incorporated into an arsenal, we think about all the juicy upside that's there, and we see it in spring training games, and we look at the spring training data and we say, oh my God, he's throwing it 30% of the time. Can you imagine what would happen if Logan Gilbert threw a splitter 30% of the time? The thing that people, myself included, need to pump the brakes on is they're throwing it that much in spring training for a reason. And that's because it's a new pitch and they're trying to see if they want to incorporate it into their arsenal, right? Seeing how it plays off the other pitches, seeing how it plays, getting real-time feedback from batters. What can often be the case, I find, is they'll come into a game that matters, and they'll throw it and it'll get hit, and they'll be like, "Yep, never mind." Like they will very quickly go back to the security blankets that were there. Now, that's not always the case. Lance McCullers Jr. is a perfect example. Lance McCullers Jr. debuted a slider and was like, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to this pitch more so than often." So I did want to provide that caveat. With that said, giving him a pitch that plays off of what is unarguably really his best pitch in his four-seamer in that way is very, very exciting, right? Obviously, I made that overlay that I tweeted, and you get to see the capabilities of it, right? You get to see what happens when you have a pitch that's kind of going down and away, and you can see that there's a lot of swing and miss there. You can see that it tunnels very effectively with the four-seamer. So on the one hand, if I'm being a practical baseball fan, I'm taking a step back and saying, okay, great. Maybe this is a new third option that he could throw to get more swings and misses, and increase his K rate, maybe jump it up to 24, 25%, like we saw on that smaller sample in 2021. But I'm also saying, okay, maybe he doesn't really throw it at all. And then on the other side, I'm saying maybe he's a four-seam splitter guy. So at the end of the day, it's an exciting new pitch for him, and I'm excited to see how he actually incorporates it into the arsenal.
The splitter has apparently become a popular pitch to learn this winter, not just Gilbert, but a few other Mariners like Robbie Ray and even some other guys, outside of Seattle. Do you think there's anything more to that? Because it doesn't seem like just a coincidence to me.
No, I don't think it's a coincidence either. I mean, I think some of the dudes are, I don't know if we know it is with Logan, where it's like a drive line thing. And maybe, these guys are going and they're finding that is the pitch that helps them unlock the other, it helps them play to their strengths and unlocks other things in their arsenal. Anecdotally, I don't know, truly, let me underline the word anecdotally. Pitchers get together and talk, right? Like they're like, "Hey, show me that new grip that you learned." Like, "Oh, I'm going to give that a shot." Sometimes it's led by a front office. I think we saw that last year in New York when all of a sudden these dudes were throwing cutters left and right. Like Tyone was throwing a cutter, Cortez was throwing more of a cutter, Cole was throwing a cutter. So I think we've seen
cutter's been a big thing in Seattle too.
Yeah, cutter, and I know the sweeper too, right? It felt like everyone at some point in the bullpen was like throwing some version of a sweeper. So I think that was kind of big there too. I don't know if it's necessarily that one pitch type in particular. But I imagine just like with Logan, there are opportunities for pitchers like Ray, who's another great example, where it just could be something that standalone is good, but also, kind of like a rising tide lifts all ships kind of thing in terms of the arsenal, right?
I want to talk about George Kirby. You mentioned him earlier.
Yeah.
Because, dude, I think the sky's the limit for this guy, even this year, especially after what he did against the Astros in that playoff game. When you have that kind of elite command with that kind of repertoire, I mean, that's just different. So how do you see his 2023 going?
Oh, baby, I'm with you. Sky's the limit. Very excited. I find, obviously during the offseason, you spend a lot of time researching, making your plans for if, in my shoes, what your top 100 is going to look like. And I felt like every time I was Googling a stat or savanting a stat, Kirby always showed up. He just always showed up in the top 10 of something. He was looking at my notes over here. I always want to caveat that. When I look over here, I'm looking at notes. I feel like such a jerk, just not looking at the person I'm talking to. I'm just so anxious that I have to say that. Okay. Giving people the real insight into my character.
I like that you came prepared. You got numbers. You got it all. Yeah.
I do it all for you, Ty. I die for you. You know what I mean?
Thank
I just met you. But that's what it is. I see the PlayStation thing over your top right hand shoulder, and I'm with you. Yeah. So here are some of the ways in which he appeared. One of four pitchers with 5 pitches, 5 with a pitching plus grade over 100. Pitching plus being an Saris and some others contributed to that metric. But pitching plus, the higher the better. One of 4 pitchers with 5 pitches over 100. 5th on 4-seam in zone swinging strike leaders. Love that stat, right? If you're going to put a 4-seamer in the zone and you're going to get swings and misses, what more can you ask for, right? You can locate it for a called strike and you're still going to get a whiff. So the fact that he's 5th on 4-seam in zone swinging strike, great. 4th on a list of pitchers that batters were most aggressive against, which I also love, right? Because he played against that aggression. They said, you know what? I'm going to sit fastball and I'm going to knock it out of the park. And what do? They swing and miss. And they can't knock it out of the park because he had the lowest WOBA on hard hit four seam fly balls. That is almost zero. I think he had one in the second half.
That's
right?
insane.
It's insane. I mean, obviously that park is going to help.
Yeah.
But for people who are listening, being like, great, another nerd who's talking about esoteric stats that I don't care about. All I'm saying is he does not give up hard hit fly balls. You don't want hard hit fly balls.
Yeah.
Those are what home runs are. He mitigates that. He doesn't do it. And that's in his freshman year doing this, his rookie year, whatever, rookie sophomore year doing this. I love it. I'm all about it. I'm excited to see how he grows in the next year.
Yeah, that's the first 130 innings of his career, and that's it.
Unbelievable.
That's just ridiculous. Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything. We're going to be doing predictions here in a couple weeks, including league-wide predictions. George Kirby and Cy Young might go together here.
Why not?
In the next couple weeks, because I'm so stoked. And the more that I think about it, and the more that I think about that start against the Astros in Seattle, I can't help myself. I really can't. More from my conversation with Alex Fast in just a moment, but real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Want to see the 2023 Mariners up close and personal? I'm giving away 2 main level tickets to one of the Mariners value games in either April or May. The game is up for you to decide if you win. Eligible series for this giveaway are the ones with the Angels and Brewers in April and the Rangers and A's in May. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a comment on any of our episodes from this week. We will randomly pick a video and a comment from that video to determine a winner next week. Good luck and go M's. Alex Fast of pitcherlist.com is here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Alex, how do you assess Robbie Ray's 2022 season? Because obviously there was a slow start and then some incredibly rough moments in the postseason, but he was also, 10th in Ks per 9, 20th in xFIP. He's proven in the past he can be one of the baddest dudes on the planet, and we saw that in flashes last year, but just not over a consistent stretch. And we get a lot of comments about him on our shows, and frankly, just some Mariners fans have already grown impatient with him. Obviously, he's the biggest free agent signing Jerry DiPoto has made since coming to Seattle, so naturally there's going to be a lot more scrutiny there than most. I understand that, but would you say his struggles have been a bit overblown?
Overblown. I mean, yes, solely because we as baseball fans can be so reactionary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had I had a very good conversation with Paul Sewald. We were fortunate not to have a conversation with him at PitchList for this thing that we do called PitchCon, which is a fundraiser that we did for ALS. Not to plug our own stuff, but he was
go ahead, plug away.
Do you have a minute to talk about one of the best baseball websites out there? He talked about just one of the things that he really opened up was just about we're human beings, right? And the kind of death threats that he receives after he blows particular things. And it's I always want to bring that up on podcasts to be
right.
They're human beings, chill out. The last thing they want to do is go out and blow a game in front of 60,000 people and everyone watching on TV. Trust me, that's not their plan. It's really not their plan to do it.
Yeah.
So when it came to Ray, I understand why there can be some concern, because there's concern on my end too about what that ceiling looks like and if he can achieve that again. We saw the walk rate jump up, right? We saw the sinker get some whiffs, but we saw it get hit hard, right? 406 WOBA last year is really way above league average, right? Not a lot of hard contact, but not great to see. Michael Ajedo, who's I'm sure who's a fantastic writer for Baseball Prospectus, huge Mariners fan, made a really good point in his Baseball Prospectus article. I think it was this year. He was missing locations, and if you're going to miss your locations, velocity is going to make up for that, right? But the velocity dropped. Right. And I don't know what happened there. Have you seen what his spring velo has been? I was trying to find it before this and I couldn't really find anything pertinent.
No, and part of the issue with that is Root Sports has been barely broadcasting any of the games, so it's been very difficult to even just get eyes on the Mariners this spring so far. So
why would a fan base with a bunch of young people want to watch their favorite team in spring?
Especially
why would they want that?
Especially when you own the network as the team. But
all right, we're not going to get into that.
So it's a whole thing.
Career. But that's a very good point. And until I see that velo has returned, I don't see like a Cy Young season repeat. I don't see something really close to that. Robbie Ray is still a very good pitcher. He doesn't need to have that to be extremely dominant. But if he's going to express that upside, I really would like to see that velocity back. And that's why too, when I see the splitter, I'm like, that's a fun new toy. Like maybe it get you some more whiffs here and there, but like velo is important for that game. The last thing I'll say about him too is like that 93, 94 mile an hour threshold for four seamers is so important. It's theoretically when you see the largest difference in performance from a pitching perspective, or from a hitting perspective, I should say, where you see like real impactful change start to happen. I thought maybe that would creep up to 94, 95 with the way that velo is going in the game right now, but it still seems like 93, 94 is that really important mark. So him kind of dancing back and forth between there is not great to see. But if he can find that velo again, I think he can return to his success.
What have you seen out of Luis Castillo going from Cincinnati to Seattle? So the Mariners iteration of Castillo, because I don't think we've seen the best out of that changeup thus far.
Okay, so that's a great point. What I've seen is a shift to a fly ball pitcher. What I've seen is like a crazy renaissance for a pitcher that you don't really get to see that often, and it speaks to Castillo's ability to pitch. As you very aptly mentioned in Cincinnati, changeup all the time, right? Dominant changeup, giffable changeup, pitching ninja changeup, right? Then again, not to keep plugging Ahedo's work, but wrote a great article about how maybe the feel for that pitch is starting to go away, right? That would concern me a lot if the slider wasn't as dominant as it was. It wouldn't surprise me to look at his stat line this year and see a low 3 ERA led by a lot of fly balls that are not leaving the yard and a four-seam slider approach with a few changeups mixed in. He doesn't need it really anymore, which is so, you cannot say that about many pitchers, that they don't need what was previously their best pitch. I don't know if we could say it's definitively gone, that changeup will be there, but it's important to remember that all of these pitches are contextual, right? You don't add a cutter without impacting your four-seamer, right? You don't make changes or benefit your slider maybe without in some way impacting your changeup. The correlation between four-seam and cutter obviously a little bit more linked than it would be between slider and changeup, but still, it's all contextualized. So while the changeup might not be the whiff pitch that it once was, the gains that he has made with the slider make me think, man, that he could be really good in Seattle this year.
Fantasy baseball is obviously a big part of what you do over at Pitcher List. So out of all the guys we've talked about, who has the highest fantasy upside this year? Is it just as simple as Castillo, or do you actually really like a Kirby or maybe even a Ray or Gilbert more from this perspective?
I'll give you a Locked On Mariners exclusive. Because my when does this podcast come out? Does it come out actually today or in a day?
Yeah, it's coming out literally today. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Like an hour or two after this. So
that's very funny. Okay, so later on today, I'll be talking with Nick about my top 100, which comes out tomorrow. The first podcast will come out today. So Luis Castillo is my 12th overall pitcher, so I think he will have the highest fantasy impact, but not far behind him in the high 20s is George Kirby. So I would say that Castillo, I believe in the most overall, if I were a betting man about who would be the most impactful fantasy pitcher in the upcoming season, but almost just as pertinent is George Kirby might not be too far behind him.
Nice. Locked On Mariners world premiere right there for you guys. So of course,
the most boring world premiere ever. Sorry.
Flam.
Luis, top 100 fantasy starting.
Luis Castillo is 12th on Alex Fast's rankings.
It's like unsubscribe.
So of course, a big discussion in baseball right now is the pitch clock, and I'm sure you've talked about it ad nauseum at this point, so I'm not going to linger on it for too long, but I am curious to hear your thoughts on how you think pitcher and team strategies might develop over time, and what kind of loopholes you think might be exploited as everyone grows more comfortable working within it.
God, I loved watching Max Scherzer do this, but I also hated it because Max Scherzer reminded me of the guys who are in my home fantasy league who read our home constitution and then find whatever way to manipulate what they're doing to like they like game the system to the best of their ability. And as a fantasy league commissioner, I hate it. But as watching Max Scherzer do it, it cracks me up. So kind of what I'm referring to is he's been sort of gamifying it a bit, or trying to see where he can push the boundaries. Where like he knows that a batter has just stepped out because he gets his one timeout per at bat. But he doesn't have to do anything. He can stay ready. So as soon as the batter, gets back in the box, he can pitch. Right. That cracks me up, but I also think that it's like one of those frustrating exploitations of the rule. These rules, I genuinely believe, are made with the best of intent. I firmly believe that. Like, I think they are trying to benefit the game. We could talk about whether it's good or bad, but I do believe is an attempt by the commissioner's office to be like, we know what the numbers look like, and we got to get this back up. You know what I mean? We got to get the pace of play going. We got to get that. If we're going to attract a younger audience, blah, 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 we got to figure this out. So I will say this. I like the notion of it. I do like that it increases the pace of the game. There's a big difference between watching the spring training games and watching the WBC and being like, oh, wow, yeah. I do get frustrated by some of the smaller things about like the batter being alert, right? To me, I saw a great counterpoint yesterday where it's like, well, why does the batter need to be alert at 8 seconds? Like, the pitcher could throw the ball whenever. Right? We don't need to do that 8-second thing. I also think that early example, which I think was the league's worst nightmare of seeing a game end on that, was super frustrating. I think there are I would hope that the league learns from it and says, okay, we tried it. It works. Here are the small tweaks that we're going to make. Like that, I would
before
really
opening day. Yeah.
Either before opening day or even if they give it like I don't think it's something that you could would be too impactful if you changed it even before the All-Star game or anything like that. Right. It seems malleable enough that they could make adjustments quick. The adjustments that I think that they should make are like, actually, we don't need it in the 9th inning. Like, I think that's fine. I think it's okay to like take your time in the 9th inning.
Yeah, I think high leverage innings in general, like 7, 8, 9 would be like, let's just go just normal baseball. We talked about this, my co-host and I, a couple weeks ago, and that's kind of what we landed on. Same thing with like the automatic runner thing. Like, let's just do normal extra inning rules for like the first couple innings, and then like
all about it.
Yeah, if we get to like the 12th, 13th, whatever, all right, sure, put the automatic runner on. Fine.
Started on the 12th. I'm with you. Started at the 12th, give them 2 innings of quote unquote real baseball, because the whole point is like we don't want to like get into the pen and exhaust these guys, and I get that. Although I was talking to a pitcher who made a good point, who was like, man, for minor leaguers that sucks, because they loved those games because they're like, I'm coming up. They just had an 18-inning game yesterday. I'm coming up to pitch in the big leagues. Obviously a small use case, but like, yeah, bring it in the 12th. I'm all about that.
Right. Before you go, I want to ask you about the the team that the Mariners are chasing, the defending champion Astros. First, from the outside looking in, how much do you think the gap has closed between these two teams, just with the departure of Justin Verlander and the injury to Lance McCullers? And secondly, what should expectations be for Hunter Brown in his first year in Houston's rotation?
Ooh. Wow, I didn't even know you were allowed to talk this in depth about the Astros on a Mariners podcast.
Oh yeah, we're doing ALS previews and all this stuff the next week or so. Yeah, we're doing it all. We're covering all the bases.
Do I need to get in like a dunk to solidify myself with the fan base on the Astros? Or
yeah. I mean, go for it. I would love that. I co-sign that.
Let's talk about these losers. Listen. Anytime you're going to lose a pitcher of Justin Verlander's caliber, and not make up for it with another bona fide Hall of Fame ace, you're going to take a step back, right? Mm. One of the things that is so incredibly impressive to me about Houston is that, unlike, I believe, any other team in baseball, if you go to their roster resource page right now and you go to their rotation and you look at original signing info, you'll see which team originally signed that pitcher, right? All 5 of them, entire rotation, signed and developed by the Houston Astros. Mm. That's remarkable. Mm-hmm. Like, that is absolutely remarkable and almost unprecedented to see a full rotation with a competitive team, right? We're not talking about like the Pittsburgh Pirates who said, yeah, we're just going to call up a bunch of schlubs from the minor leagues and see what we got. We're talking about a World Series champ, perennial World Series contender, and they have all in-house developed talent. So while people may look at it and go, what is a Jose Urquidy again? Like why a casual fan might look at what is Hunter Brown? I wouldn't sleep on him because Christian Javier could be another Cy Young contendant. Framber Valdez, an insane amount of quality starts last year. Luis Garcia and Jose Urquidy, a little bit of warts for sure, but great high-end talent. Hunter Brown, as you mentioned, end on him, just a fantastic four-seamer, right? I don't know what his full season is going to look like, obviously, because there have been some conversations about, I don't know if it was Brandon Bilak or another starting. Yeah, it might have been Bilak there. Oh, Brian Garcia. They were like thinking about maybe stretching out Brian Garcia, I think. Lance McCullers is not out for the year, but
Right.
Brown is going to get some appearances, and the four-seam curveball combination is very, very good. The command probably going to take a step back, but that's a lot of fun upside from a young dude who's slotting in at year number 5.
So where do you think the Mariners are right now in comparison to the Astros? I still think that there's a fairly clear divide, but I do feel that the gap has closed because, I'm the high man on what the Mariners have done this offseason. Obviously, I think that they still needed to add another bat on top of what they did with Wong and Teoscar, but I think that they got better. I mean, second base was a black hole for them. They got better there. They didn't necessarily go out and get the big free agent, right? But Colton Wong's an upgrade there. Teoscar gives you more dependability than Mitch Haniger, and obviously, at his 100th percentile, he's a fringe MVP candidate. And obviously, you're getting a full season out of George Kirby and Luis Castillo and Cal Raleigh, who's now good. So and obviously the Astros have they brought back Michael Brantley. They added Jose Abreu, but again, they lost a Hall of Fame surefire, ace. So, what do you think
I'll say
about those two teams right now?
If let's break it down strategically. We'll talk about bullpen and rotation and offense, and maybe I don't know if I can speak to defense as well. I can do a quick look, but bullpen I'll give to Seattle. I think could be a top bullpen in baseball. Rotation, I think, is super close, but I might edge out to Seattle just because there's a little more surety there. Wouldn't surprise me if that gap was actually closer than people think. Offense, I think, is pretty handedly Houston, right? I mean, it's even just Yordan Alvarez alone, right? If he's healthy, his hand's fine, he's maybe the best pure hitter in all of baseball. So did the gap close? Yes, I think it did close. Do I still give the advantage to Houston with that offense? I think overall I do. I think the AL West is still theirs to win, but it's a perfect time for there to be a more balanced schedule, right? Because those teams aren't just going to be beating up on one another anymore between Houston and Seattle, right? It's not just about, Houston took a bunch of the series from us and that's super frustrating. It's not that anymore. I will say, though, love a good rivalry. And I think with the way that the playoffs went, right, it's even hotter than ever, right? It's even another great sound clip from Alex Fast. It's even hotter than ever. Dang it.
I'm going to be clipping that, posting that on Twitter. Yeah. That's going to be the tagline for the whole episode. It's hotter than ever.
What does Alex Fast think is hotter than ever?
It's gonna be that's gonna be a YouTube short. It's going on our TikTok.
You're a mess. People are like, yeah, I was excited to hear Alex Fast on the pod, and then I listened to it and unfollowed. I'm excited to watch them compete this year. The gap is closer. AL West is still Houston's to lose, in my opinion, but Seattle can be right behind them.
Well, Alex, thank you again for chatting with me today. Really appreciate it. Like I told you off air, big fan of what you and Nick Pollock do over at Pitcher List. It's great stuff. Anyone that hasn't checked out Pitcher List, check it out. It's a great resource. Tell us what you got going on. Anything you want to plug? Obviously Pitcher List, but you got anything else going on as well?
Yeah, big week. I'm launching my top 100 fantasy starting pitchers today, which is great. And then been doing a very interesting study that I'm talking to as many people about as possible about the impacts of finger pressure on baseballs. Partnered with Driveline to do a study. Spoke at the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference about it. So really excited about that. Hopefully can have an article coming out in the coming weeks about some of the findings. But yeah, I think there's a big opportunity there. So excited to talk to any and all about it. But yeah, man, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. That was it was great, and looking forward to seeing that project that you're working on. Let's do it again sometime.
Appreciate it. Yeah, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks again to Alex Fast for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. That's going to do it for our show, and thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. I've been your host, Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez. That's DaneGnzlz, and my co-host Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Mariners as well. That's one word, Locked On Mariners, and you can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, just like us, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And with that, have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.